Hello and welcome back to another video. My name is Juan Londoño. Today we're going to talk about, are older digital cameras any good nowadays, or are we just wasting time with them? This isn't going to be a very long video, but I want to touch on the topic, right? We're not going to take 2 or 3 cameras and pixel peep and look at color science. And I'll tell you why, because that's very subjective. Pixel peeping, not so much, but the whole color science thing, if you find a Canon fanboy, a Nikon fanboy, a Fuji fanboy, a Hasselblad fanboy, a Leica fanboy, a Sony fanboy, and that applies to fangirls too, by the way, they're all going to say the color science of their respective companies is the best, right? And I hear it all the time in videos. You know, I haven't shot Leica, and I have not shot digital Hasselblad. I've seen the reviews, and I love the Hasselblad color science when they compare them like with the Fuji GFX system. I think it is different, and I do see the Leica colors. I really, really do, right? I have friends that have Leicas, and there's a deeper, richer, contrasty look to those color images, right? And then likewise the black and white. So there are differences, of course, right? But you know, if you're shooting a Sony system, that's probably the least of my favorite color sciences. Canon has some interesting ones depending on the camera, and of course Nikon does. I love their color science. I always have loved their color science. And then Fuji is known for their color science, especially in the older sensors. And I'm not even talking film simulations. So we're not going to go into, I'm not going to show you, pictures of different, images from different cameras, because like I said, it's very subjective. But we're going to talk about 5 main reasons why owning an older digital camera, whether it's DSLR or digital mirrorless, either one, why there's a benefit involved in having one of these older cameras. So let's start. One thing that you're going to hear people say, and I'm not really sure how valid it is why would you buy an old sensor or an old camera when you can buy a new one? The new ones are so much better. They're going to give you better results, blah, 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 right? So my question is, what were you saying in, say, 2010, when the cameras in 2010 were what they were, right? Or in 2005, when this Canon R5 Classic came out, right? The version 1, the original, it had a 12, 13 megapixel sensor, and people were shooting, this was a $3,200 camera, right? It was just a serious camera. And the lenses for it were amazing. Nobody was saying anything back then, right? Nobody was saying, you know what, I'm not going to shoot any weddings. I'm going to wait until 2025 because the cameras then are going to be much better, and then I'll just start shooting weddings then. No, nobody ever said anything like that, right? Unheard of. So people shot with what they had, and people were shooting beautiful weddings with this. Now, the Canon 5D Classic has come back, and it's a craze right now. People can't buy enough of these. They're like $250, $300. So much cheaper, right? Like 10% of what they used to cost. Like a tenth, right? So this argument that, don't buy an old camera because the new cameras are so much better, right? We were shooting products back then with these cameras. We were shooting people, portraits, weddings, events, you name it, we were shooting it. Professional photographers were using these cameras. So that argument doesn't hold water for me, unfortunately, right? We're going to start this video looking at the 5 things that I consider are good reasons for owning a older digital camera. And if anybody ever tells you they suck, they don't do what the new cameras do, yeah, of course. And they don't have the complicated menus that the new cameras have. But they were fantastic back then, and you know what? They're fantastic today. If you want to start comparing them to the newer ones, that's a different story. But if you look at them face value for what they can do, they're amazing cameras. So let's dive in. The first one of these, number 1, is obviously that an older digital camera is much cheaper than a newer digital camera. Now, yes, There are older digital cameras that are still $2,000, and there are new digital cameras that are only $500. We're not talking about that. We're talking about respective models, right? So I'm looking at a mirrorless full frame, right? Really, really nice camera. It's going to be worth between $2,000 and $4,000, right? And back in the day when it was new, a DSLR may have been between $2,000 and $4,000. I paid $3,200 for my 5D. But you can get one for $250 today. You see the difference? That's a huge drop, right? So price is the main and most obvious of these, right? Now I recommend you go to a reliable source like KEH or MPB. I'll list their websites down below. I don't get any credit. I'm not affiliated with them, but you can check them out. They have used equipment and they rate them very conservatively. Their stuff, I'm going to show you a camera here in a second that I got from them. So the main thing I wanted to talk about was just that one, right? We know that it's price. And why is that important? Well, it makes for a good first camera. If you've never owned a digital camera, you've always used your phone and you want to get into the digital market and you don't want to spend too much because you don't know if you're going to like it. You want to get started to see if you can understand the principles of photography first before you make a decision. Then a used camera is a wonderful, wonderful choice. What else is it good for? Well, for an existing photographer, it's a great backup camera, right? If I go into the mountains and I have, say, my Fuji GFX system, which is a big, heavy camera with big lenses, it's a medium format digital sensor. The sensor is very big, so it's a big, heavy camera. I can take something like this, right? My street photography camera. I can take something like this, stick it in my backpack with just maybe like a zoom lens, a very versatile zoom lens. And that's it. And it doesn't take up a lot of space in case anything happens to my main camera. I don't want to lose that, right? Now, yeah, I'll have my phone, but I can't enlarge anything with my phone. So, phones do a wonderful job. I have the Samsung 25 Ultra, Galaxy 25 Ultra, and the camera on that thing is, I can't even tell you how amazing it is. But the minute I go to enlarge something, it breaks down, right? It's not meant for that. So, so that's another good reason. A good backup camera for any of us is a nice, solid secondhand camera. And of course, the last one is if you like exploring other systems, right? One of the things that I do is I buy a lot of gear. And I'm not buying it to make my photography better, right? I don't have this, oh, it's time to get the newer one. Oh, it's time to get the newer one. Oh, it's time. No, that's not. What I'm doing is I'm going and buying older cameras because, oh, I want to experiment with the Fuji system. Let me get an old Fuji X system, right? X mount system. Ooh, I want to experiment with a Nikon. I get a nice little simple Nikon camera. Ooh, I want to experiment with a Sony. I get an inexpensive older Sony. And that brings me into the whole system. If I want to really dive into it later, I could get more lenses for it. I could do other stuff, right? But in the meantime, it cures that desire to use other equipment. One of the things I enjoy doing, I've been using this little camera I just showed you to do all my street photography, right? But the next one I'm going to start using is the Fuji. This is an XH1, and it's a little bigger, but this is a lot smaller than a full frame mirrorless. This is a crop. And even though the XH series is hybrid, that's what the H means, so it's good for video and photography, so they make them a little more robust. This is still tiny compared. Let me show you a DSLR, right? Which is about the size of the mirrorless cameras. It's much thicker, right? It's much thicker. Now that has a smaller lens. This DSLR has a smaller lens, right? I put a pancake lens, and we'll go into some details in a minute. But this is a relatively small camera. This is going to be my street photography camera with this 16 to 50, which ends up being like a 24 to 80 or something like that, right? Beautiful, beautiful range. So why? Am I trying to make better pictures? No, I just want different pictures. I want to go into the streets with a different camera system. I want to play with the camera. I want to get familiar with the menus, and then I want to go shoot with it just for a different experience, right? It's something different. It's fun. It's why we go vacation in different parts of the world. We don't always go to the same spot because you want variety, and for that reason, right? When we can do something with variety, we do, right? Which is why I have so many little cameras laying around, because I actually like using them. So enough of number one. Number two is a great selection. Now, what do I mean by that, right? Well, today, right, when you're watching this video, you have a range of cameras at your disposal. You have all the new cameras and you have all the used cameras, right? This is the most cameras up until this point in your life that there's ever been. Because a month ago, there weren't all the cameras that there are available today. Because I'm sure in the last month, some cameras were released, right? So what does that mean? That in 5 years, there are going to be even more cameras because there are going to be 5 years more of cameras plus whatever's new in that 5th year, right? So, excuse me. So what I mean by great selection is at the point you're at, you have the best selection in the world. You have all the new cameras at your disposal, and then you can go back in time and get any DSLR or just mirrorless camera, digital mirrorless camera that you want. So it's a wonderful, wonderful time. That's what I mean by greater selection. If you're only looking at new cameras, your selection is limited, right? Once you open the door to the used market, now you have an amazing amount of volume. And it'll drive you crazy because I've spent, before buying this thing, I was looking at so many different cameras, and to come up with this one, because I already have a GFX, a Fuji GFX, which is a medium format. Why would I want a Fuji crop sensor? Well, one is I wanted to play with their lenses. They're renowned, and the truth is they're beautiful, right? The colors of the X system. This particular sensor has a reputation for just putting out these amazing, amazing colors that look very filmic, right? Like the old film days. Now looking at the film simulations, just the sensor in standard mode had a very, very interesting hue to it where you feel like you're looking at film, and that's pretty. I want to do a little bit of that. I want to see, and I can adjust everything on my computer, but it's interesting to get that right out of the camera to see what it looks like. So you know what I mean by great selection, right? It's more for us to play with. Number 3, we're going to look at color. And there are 3 aspects to this, right? There's the color science, which we already talked about. And you can go watch videos anywhere you want, or YouTube or anywhere else. And you can get an idea for the color science that all these cameras are putting out. And then you can decide which one better suits you, right? Of these old or new cameras, really, for that matter, right? The newer ones are a little more bland because they reproduce what you see like with amazing fidelity, so there's no variance. The older ones had a lot of variance, and then it's a matter of which one do you care for. So color science is the first subcategory there. The other one is going to be sensor coding. Now, there was also the CCD versus the CMOS sensors, right? The older sensors in some companies were CCD, like Nikon started with CCD, and I think Fuji did as well. I think Canon right off the bat started using CMOS, at least in the serious cameras. When I started looking at them, they were already CMOS. So a lot of people say the CCD sensors have an interesting hue as well in color science. So if you're interested in that, you look for a CCD sensor camera, which there are so many of them, and you try it out, right? And if you don't pay a lot for it, you can always sell it back or give it to somebody that's interested in photography. So color science, sensor coding, and CCD versus CMOS. Those are the kind of the 3 things that affect color. And of course, putting different lenses, right? Putting a vintage lens on a camera changes the color because those older lenses didn't have certain coatings. And I use old 80s and 70s medium format film camera lenses like the Pentax 672. I use its lenses on my Fujifilm GFX system. Oh my gosh, the reproduction of those images. Those lenses don't resolve 100 megapixels, but the pictures for portraits, I don't need 100 megapixels, and it's just the color is beautiful. Now we're going to touch on topic number 4, which is lower megapixels typically, right? You can buy a new camera that's 20 megapixels, and you can buy an older camera that's 24, so that doesn't apply. But we're going to just assume here that most of the old cameras you're going to look at can be anywhere between 5 megapixels and 24, right? So, and a lot of the new cameras now are coming out with 32, 40, 45, 60, and 100, right? So what does that do? It allows me to use lenses that are less complicated and cheaper, right? I can use lenses from film cameras on digital cameras with an adapter. I have adapters for everything, all of my cameras, and it allows me to use all my film lenses on all my digital cameras. And because the older cameras only had a 16 megapixel, for example, or 15 or 12 megapixel sensor, those old lenses were more than fine, right? Even the new lenses that are not super expensive are more than fine. So it just opens up your window to all of the lenses that you can use, because you don't have to worry that, oh, my camera's 40 megapixels, so depending on what lens I put on there, it's not going to resolve the 40 megapixels. Then, you know, do I want to shoot a landscape with a lens that doesn't resolve the detail? Probably not, right? Like I said, portraits are more forgiving because you don't want all that detail, right? You don't want pores and all that. So if it's a little softer, it's okay. But, you know, for everything else, product photography, you know, there's a lot of photography where you need that detail, especially like huge enlargements, right? So keep that in mind. Just know that a lower megapixel camera sensor is going to allow you to use so many more lenses, and it's awesome. And then the last one. There's a debate going on, and, you know, it's not even a debate. It's, how do I word this? There's a frame of mind that film cameras were so hard to use. And I think a lot of us photographers that came from the film days brag about how we used to shoot film and it was so hard because we didn't know what we were getting until you developed the pictures. Let me tell you something. I shot film for 19 years. And that's true. You didn't know what you were getting until you got it. But you knew the camera well enough because there were only 3 freaking buttons on it, right? There was ISO, which was the film you got, which once you put that in there, that was the end of the conversation. There was no more topic. Then you had 2 other things to adjust, right? The aperture and the shutter speed. And according to the light meter, or a light meter of any type, you were kind of restricted to what they were going to be, right? So your pictures came out typically okay. There was no menu system. These cameras have endless pages of menu systems. My opinion, my personal opinion, is that this, to me, is way more complicated to use than a regular film camera. I will argue that point till I go to my grave, okay? And many people don't feel that way. I don't know why. So to me, this is much more complicated to use, right? A film camera takes away all my thinking. I just adjust, and once I have that, you know, yeah, you have to adjust for every picture. There's no snap the thing and the camera does everything. It slows you down a little bit, but the ease that I shoot with is totally different than shooting with this. Did I do it right? Did I accidentally move the button? Did I shift the aperture? Because these cameras do that. Did I hit the, you know, I look and I go, oh my gosh, I didn't know I was doing that. When did that happen? When did I shift it? Oh, so, you know, the camera will adjust itself, but if I was trying to shoot with an open lens and then I accidentally moved the aperture ring and then it moved it to, you know, it closed it down, I wasn't getting the depth of field and I wasn't even realizing it because it was on, you know, aperture priority, so it's doing other things and it's adjusting for the light. And my point is that older cameras, if you look at this Canon 5D, the menu system is so simple. It's a DSLR from 2005, right? So much, much simpler menu. So here we have my M6 Mark II, right? The Canon M6 Mark II. This is from 2019. This is a 32 megapixel crop sensor camera. The menu is pretty elaborate, okay? Canon had pretty good, they've always had very good menus, right? But it's very elaborate. This is a 2018 Fuji X-H1, as I told you, right? The Fuji menus, not as clean as I'd like them to be, right? They're not really difficult. Once you play with them a little while, then you kind of feel them, you know, whereas like the older Sony cameras, I could just never get used to those. But with the Fuji, they're not intuitive as much as I like, but you do get comfortable with them. 2019, right? Much cheaper camera. When this was new, it was close to $2,000. You can get one now for $600, right? And this one, they don't make them anymore as well, right? They don't support them anymore. Never had a good line of lenses, but I have about 14 lenses for this thing. A lot of them are just like TT Artisans and 7 Artisans and Viltrox. Very, very good lenses, by the way. And then you have the 5D Classic, not the Mark 1, not the Mark 2, right? Not the Mark 3 and not the Mark 2 or 3 or 4, just the Classic. This is the Mark 1, basically. And this camera is, if you watch videos now on the internet, people are buying these because they say that it's probably the best color science ever of any digital camera. I've heard Nikon and Sony users review this camera and say that. I'm glad I just owned this. I didn't have to buy it, but you can get one for $250, $300. I mean, they're a steal. This is a 40 millimeter f2.8 autofocus lens. Look how thin this thing is, right? This is a true pancake lens. So This makes it almost a street photography camera. If you put a little strap on this, you can do that. But it's still kind of big and thick. And my point is, this menu system, super, super easy to use, very, very, very simple, you know? And there's a lot to be said for that. So simplicity is point number 5. So you have 5 points here that make buying an old camera very, very attractive. I hope that was useful. If it was, or entertaining, please like, subscribe. Don't forget to hit the little notification bell, because that lets you know when I produce another video and release it. If you want to buy me a coffee, I am doing reviews now, and I'm going to release another one in the following week. So these are little things I either rent or buy with the money you send me. So thank you very much ahead of time. I hope you guys are having a wonderful, wonderful day. Please stay healthy. I got my water over here. Hydrate yourselves. And I will catch you in the next video. Until the next one, ciao for now.